Welcome back to Halloween on Christmas 3. I'm Adam J. Well, you all requested this one forever, so I figured I might as well do it. I really don't want to. I've honestly just run out of ways to say that I'm not a fan of this series, guys. Out of these 8 films I'm about to rank, I love one of them and tolerate 2 of them. The rest are pretty much shit to me. Most of you know this. Why would you want me to rank these? Can my suffering never cease? I actually watched these again for you. Fuck it. Fuck it. Let's just get it over with. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre series.
You fucking people.
Coming in at dead last is Texas Chainsaw 3D. I already epic film failed this one back in the day, and I stand by that it is the worst and most insulting film in this franchise to date. This movie attempted to just be a direct sequel to the original film, negating all the other sequels, and wouldn't you know it, it failed miserably at it. It tries to make the Sawyer family sympathetic, while making the town that killed them in the name of justice evil bastards. You can't do that. This is like making Freddy Krueger an innocent victim and having the parents of Springwood be the villains. It does not work. Continuity takes it straight up the ass, as there are now several family members who were not present in the original film but are somehow here for some reason. The fuck? One of these people is played by the original Leatherface, Gunnar Hansen. Yeah, that hurt me. That really hurt me. But it also appears that the writers of this film didn't own a calendar and have absolutely no concept of time. The whole Sawyer family is killed except for Leatherface, his Aunt Verna, and a baby who grows up to be the main protagonist of the film. We cut to present day, and this baby is now a woman in her early 20s. Even though the first film took place in the early 70s, and she should be about 39 by now? What the fuck is this? I mean, you can't even make the argument that the film takes place in the 90s. All the fucking cops have smartphones. This movie makes my brain hurt. It is an insult. It should not be watched. Next film. At number 7 for me is Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Hey kids, have you ever wanted to see Leatherface as a crossdresser? Did you ever want to see Leatherface being Renee Zellweger's little bitch? Did you ever want to see Matthew McConaughey play a redneck with a mechanical leg who never shuts the fuck up? Did you ever want to see the Sawyer family tied to the fucking Illuminati? Hopefully, to all of these things, you answered, no, nobody wants to see that shit. But they did it. This movie was so bad that the studio immediately shelved it after one viewing. However, when McConaughey and Zellweger hit it big a couple years later, they said, well, fuck it, we can make some money on this, slapped both of them on the posters, and recut the movie and released it in theaters. And it still bombed. And McConaughey and Zellweger sued their asses. As was their right. No. See, I looked it up at the Bad Career Decisions desk reference. Fuck this movie. At number 6 for me is Leatherface, the most recent film in this series to be released. The problem with this film is that it seems completely ashamed to even be a Texas Chainsaw movie. So ashamed, in fact, that if it wasn't even for the beginning of the film and the very end of the film, you would have no way of knowing that this was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. The film is a random, generic road trip horror movie that is trying so hard to be the Devil's Rejects that it forgets to have an identity of its own. The only thing keeping this from being lower on the list is that the cinematography is pretty impressive at times, and Stephen Dorff, to his credit, does give a pretty solid performance. However, much like Texas Chainsaw 3D, they try to make him the bad guy, even though he's the only character worth feeling any sympathy for. His daughter is viciously murdered by a young Leatherface and his family at the beginning of the film, and we're supposed to hate him? What? Fuck you, movie! But this movie's biggest insult is that it tries to make it a mystery as to which one of these psychos on this little road trip is the real adult Leatherface. When in reality, we know who that is because the marketing team had already leaked it online months earlier. We know who Leatherface is, you fucking told us already! There's no suspense here. This whole movie was one huge waste of time. At number 5 for me is Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Leatherface, not the one I just mentioned. God, these titles are fucking confusing. Out of all the films in this list, this one is by far the most forgettable. I didn't remember a single character's name. I had trouble remembering anything that happened in it. And this isn't just in general, this was literally 2 hours after watching the fucking thing. The only somewhat redeeming quality of this movie is Ken Foree. When he shows up, he's entirely badass, because, you know, Ken Foree's badass in general. He was cool, but sweet Jesus, the rest of these actors are terrible. The two main leads are some of the worst actors I've ever seen in a slasher film. These two have no chemistry, and I didn't give a shit about either one of their characters. They even made Viggo Mortensen boring. How the fuck is that even possible? You made Aragorn a member of the Sawyer family, and you can't even make him cool? What vile darkness made you? That is sin. That is admissible. Suck my balls. Coming in at number 4 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I know a lot of people really enjoy this film, but this film has honestly been pissing me off since the day I saw it. I will admit, Caroline Williams is good, Bill Moseley is entertaining as hell as Chop Top, some of the death scenes are memorable, and Dennis Hopper's pretty cool, if not completely over the top. The problem I have with this movie is its tone. You made a sequel to one of the most iconic and memorable horror films of all time, and your idea for said sequel was to make it a spoof. That is literally what this movie is. It's a fucking comedy. Even the poster is a mock-up of the fucking Breakfast Club. Honestly, I've never understood Tobe Hooper's reasoning for this. You can make a meme of Leatherface in the original film, looking at this one and asking the question, am I a joke to you? Because that's what it feels like. On top of that, the only character that isn't completely fucking insane in this film is Stretch, played by Caroline Williams. And even at the end, they have her go nuts. I admit, those few things I mentioned are fine, but the tone of this kills me whenever I watch it. Watching it back to back with the original is damn near impossible for me. I know some see this as an underrated sequel, and to be fair, I would recommend it if only so you can see the points I'm trying to make here, but for me, this was the beginning of the end. And I don't know how we lost control. It's the beginning of the end. And I'm sure in this I am all alone. If anyone gets that reference, give yourself a cookie. At number 3 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003. Now, if you saw my ranking last year for the Platinum Dunes horror flicks, you know I've come around to this film a bit over the years, accepting it for what it is. While the original film went for a more realistic approach, this film feels obviously scripted. That being said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you want a more conventional and in-your-face experience, you can watch this. If you want something more outside the box, you can watch the original. Both are fine in their own right. The cinematography for the film is wonderful, especially since they got the guy who did the original to do it. The acting for the main leads is fine for the most part, the film is well directed, and Andrew Briniarski is a badass Leatherface. Very different from the Leatherface in the original, but again, that's not a bad thing. The characters on the chopping block for the remake are obviously scripted, and pretty much the same stock horror characters you see in most slashers. They get the job done, there's just really not much special about them. The performance that does steal the show, however, is Arlie Ermey as Sheriff Hoyt. He is funny, he is brutal, and he is damn intimidating. The movie is worth seeing if only for him. Back in the day, I didn't really care for this movie, and I think what really threw me off about it at first was that there were no moments that really stayed with me when it was over, whereas the original kind of thrived on that. But for what it is, this remake is perfectly fine, and wasn't deserving of all the hatred I once gave it. Coming in at number 2 for me is Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. While it took me a while to come around to the remake of Texas Chainsaw, I've always liked this one, despite its faults. I think it's very underrated and undervalued. This was a prequel to the remake, which gave us more information about the Hewitt family and how they became the cannibals we know. And in all honesty, it made me realize something about the remake I'd never noticed before. The whole cannibalism thing in the remake was completely downplayed. They didn't really call much attention to it. But here, they make it very clear that these people became cannibals simply out of desperation. We find out how Hoyt became a sheriff, Leatherface's disturbing origins in the meat factory, and we cut to present day when the family encounters a new group of victims for the dinner table. The deaths are a lot bloodier in this one, and the characters, in my opinion, just have a little more to them this time around. And I really enjoyed the nods to the original film, with the dinner table scene and the heroine jumping out of the window to escape. Now, it's not perfect. Some of the things they revealed, like how Hoyt lost his teeth and how Uncle Monty lost his legs, I felt were completely unnecessary. Not awful or anything, just completely unnecessary. Just information we really didn't need to know. I don't think this is on par with the original, but for me, it's the only one that's even come close. And coming in at number 1 for me is, of course, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1973. To date, it is one of my favorite horror films, not so much for its story, but for its imagery. The imagery in this movie gave me nightmares for weeks when I was a kid. The bed of bones, the meat hook scene, the dinner table scene, the sliding door, Franklin's death. This shit was uncomfortable and scarring, but I mean that in the best way. I've heard people say that they find the movie boring nowadays, and while I disagree entirely, I can kind of see why. The movie takes a more realistic approach with everything, from its characters to its dialogue. None of it feels scripted, which is something I admire about it, but I can see where modern audiences wouldn't really get into that. If you're someone who enjoyed the remake more, I totally get why. In my opinion, that film was more tailor-made for modern audiences than any other film in this franchise. Jim Cito gives a solid performance as Great and Sawyer, which is more than I can say for his ridiculous over-the-top performance in Texas Chainsaw 2. The fuck was that? Edwin Neal as the hitchhiker is creepy as fuck when he's on screen, and he gets one of the most satisfying deaths of the series. Tobe Hooper really accomplished something special with this film. He showed us that even a film with an average script can be elevated to greatness by visuals. And make no mistake, those visuals have made this movie a horror classic to be reckoned with. So there you have it, folks. That's my ranking of the Texas Chainsaw series. You can all leave me alone about it now. How would you rank these films? Please let me know in the comments, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more.